And let's bring Dr Hasan into this picture. So the suggestion by Lee Anderson, it wasn't really a suggestion, it was an assertion. The Mayor of London is controlled by Islamists. Now, all day we've been trying to kind of get to the kernel of this kind of accusation. Which Islamists? Who are they? You know, what are the organisations or institutions or wealthy families or political factions? And how are they controlling the Mayor of London? Are they the puppeteers to his puppet? And if so, what are they trying to make him do? And has he done any of the things they're trying to make him do? I'm trying to get one nugget of information that adds up to anything here at all. And so far, I can't find one. You maybe will be able to help me kind of unpick this and see if there's even a tiny element of truth in this.
Well, no, I'm afraid I can't help you there, actually, because I'm struggling also, trying to work out who he's talking about, and it very much sounds like a conspiracy theory, which is really appalling from a Tory MP. The only, I think, thread that he's got is Sadiq Khan, like myself, used to work with the Muslim Council of Britain, which is a large Muslim umbrella body, and they had some Islamist influence. When we say Islamist, we're talking about a spectrum, and it's often used to describe Muslim extremists, if you like. That's why this has caused such a major row, because it's linking Sadiq Khan with extremism. You know, the Muslim Council of Britain...
Just explain to people, I mean, I've interviewed so many different representatives from the Muslim Council of Great Britain. I feel as I'm practically a part of it. I've been talking to representatives for, honestly, years and years and years. What is the point of the Muslim Council of Great Britain? What's it for? What does it do?
Well, which was formed in the 90s to bring Muslim activity together throughout the community, because there's now nearly 3 million Muslims, perhaps more than that, in Britain from the last census. There are over 2,000 mosques. There's communities everywhere. And it was formed to bring them together, like you have the Church of England, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and the Hindu Council, etc., just to coordinate, because people have shared values and common
interests. And if somebody said, yeah, I know what the Muslim Council of Great Britain's for, it's there to try and exert power and influence over people who've got it, like Sadiq Khan, that's what it's for. That's what Lee Anderson means. He means that the Mayor of London is in cahoots with or being controlled by the Muslim Council of Great Britain. What would you say?
Well, that's clearly not true, actually, because Sadiq Khan left the Muslim Council of Britain a long time ago, as I did. And Muslims, like every other group or faith community or non-believers, have the right to be involved in politics, etc. And there is something which I've written about called moderate political Islam, where Muslims bring their values to a shared national debate about shared values, etc. And there's a difference between that and extremism. And the seriousness of this charge really is that the Mayor of London, a great capital city, a global city, is somehow being controlled as a puppet by extremists. That's what it sounds like. That's
exactly what it sounds like, absolutely. Yeah. Alicia?
I just want just some further context that I think is important for people about these comments that Lee Anderson made. This is off the back of pro-Palestine demonstrations. This is where this all came from. This wasn't a totally off-the-cuff comment. And I think those who support and are trying to justify what Lee Anderson said are saying that what he was trying to say is, when we saw From the River to the Sea branded up and down Big Ben recently in that pro-Palestine protest, they're saying that the Met Police didn't act. They're saying that there's been various situations where the Met Police haven't acted when something maybe has breached a guideline, breached a law in these pro-Palestine rallies. And therefore, what Lee Anderson is implying, like, this is what people would suggest, is that there is kind of an unfair bias towards the Muslim community that other sectors of London aren't seeing, other communities in London aren't seeing. So I think that's what those who are supporting Lee Anderson are trying to say that he meant, but that his language was clumsy.
And certainly, John, you know, Sola Braverman is one of the many people saying that there has been kind of unfair leeway, indulgence, tolerance of really severe anti-Semitic, chants and behaviour during the marches, the pro-Palestinian marches, which have gone on in the City of London in particular, but also all over the country every single week since October the 7th. So Lee Anderson isn't a lone voice in that element, but he's certainly the first person to say that the Mayor of London's controlled by Islamists.
Well, yes, and has rightly admitted that the language was clumsy.
Yeah, but is it clumsy language or is it just wrong, untrue?
Well, of course it's wrong.
Well, then why don't you say it's not true?
Because, I mean, Islamism, as Usama said, is that's a very specific political doctrine that society ought to be organised according to Islamic law.
Yeah.
And there's a spectrum, and the implication is that Sadiq Khan is controlled by people at the violent end of that spectrum who want to impose Islamic law by force. I mean, this is absurd.
I mean,
Sadiq Khan is a moderate, pragmatic Labour politician.
We have seen, though, haven't we, all weekend, different eruptions of kind of pretty violent type protest at various Labour rallies and fundraising dinners and things like that all over across the weekend, haven't we? So maybe that's the kind of thing that precipitates this kind of accusation and discussion.
Well, it reflects, actually, the absolute tragedy in Israel and Gaza over the last 4.5 months that we've all been watching unfold. And it's horrific. Emotion on both sides are rightly quite high. I spoke to two of my rabbi friends over the weekend as an imam to try to continue that dialogue, because obviously feelings run high. Friends of mine have been killed in Gaza. Friends of my Jewish friends have been killed, were killed in Israel on October the 7th. So emotions are running extremely high. The from the river to the sea chant, for example, again, is used by both sides, who say that it should all be a Jewish state or it should all be a Palestinian state.
I've never before.
Well, the Israeli ambassador said that, from the river to the sea, there will only be one Israeli state. And
I have never heard it used
the Israeli ambassador said
in the same way.
No, arguably, there is an anti-Semitic fringe to these protests. Which is completely wrong, of course.
And to the phrase "from the river to the sea," which means "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," means we'll be free of all the Jews currently living in Israel who will be pushed into the sea.
If they mean that, then of course that's appalling.
Well, that is in general what they do mean, isn't it?
And actually, if you talk to many of them, they actually mean that they want a democratic Palestine or Israel, whatever you want to call it, where Jews and Palestinians, or Jews and Arabs, live together in harmony. I know that because I've talked to many of the people. I've been on the protests myself. My children have been. It's extremely insulting to label everybody the hate marcher who goes on those, because we've had hundreds of thousands of people. In total, millions of people have marched weekly. And yes, there is an anti-Semitic, hateful fringe who have rightly been arrested. Loads have been arrested, actually, for holding up placards and shouting abusive stuff, and quite rightly some have been prosecuted and convicted, and that's absolutely right. So I agree with the Prime Minister here that we have to take the heat out of this debate, and let's have some sensible discussions. I would suggest trying to clarify the distinction between Islam as a major world faith, Islamism, before that, political Islam, moderate political Islam, of which Sadiq Khan is an example. He's a practicing Muslim. There are many practicing Muslims in Parliament or politicians.
I think many people won't see Sadiq Khan, though, as an example of political Islam. They'll see him as a Muslim who is a British politician who isn't supposed to be, and most people will say isn't promoting any kind of Islamic view. He's just a British politician doing British things, and that's what he's doing.
Well, I would say, just as Maggie Thatcher was inspired by her conservative Christian values. David Cameron said we are a Christian country. Other prime ministers have been inspired by their religious values. In that sense, Sadiq Khan is inspired by his Muslim values, but those are universal Muslim values. All of the major world religions have universal shared values. That's my point, and it's just recognising that, for example, if I was to get involved with politics, I'm an imam, I can't leave my religious beliefs behind when I come into the public space. But what I do is find shared values, because that's the only way Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, non-believers, Buddhists, everybody can actually function in a public space, is to have that shared values commitment. But we must recognise that people all come from their unique religious and cultural backgrounds that we cannot deny and mustn't promote racism or bigotry against.
I mean, the idea of taking the heat out of this debate, isn't that just an impossible dream? I've never seen, I think, my entire life or career, a debate more fiery, more incendiary, more violent, more desperately hysterical in many ways.
I think, we could be discussing other more important things, such as the NHS. If Lee Anderson had apologised and said, I wasn't just clumsy. I was wrong. That's not what I meant.
He said the opposite. He said, I'm not apologising because I'm not wrong.
Exactly.
I'm right, so I can't apologise.
So
the wording might have been clumsy, but I'm not wrong.
I'm afraid he disgracefully kept the temperature high and raised it. And I think, we can guess about his motives. He actually holds a Labour seat, essentially, Ashfield. That is going to go back to Labour at the coming election. He possibly thinks that perhaps if he stands as an independent or for reform, he can hold it, and so it's in his interest, he thinks, to raise the temperature of this debate. But I think it's bad for the country.
Do you think that most people in this country are emotionally engaged in this particular debate? Or do you think most of them are really concerned with the NHS, with the cost of living, with education for their children?
I think all the polling evidence suggests that people are much more interested in the cost of living in the NHS. There are small groups of people who feel very, very strongly about the Israel-Palestine issue in particular, and sympathy on that swings a little this way and that. But most people are actually much more interested in issues closer to home.
I think what's interesting about that as well is that we need to remember that there's a distinction between the conflict in Gaza at the moment and the political arguments that we're having in the UK. I think there's way more people in the country who care about the conflict and care less about things like Lee Anderson creating, a news headline. I think that's the distinction that we need to make. They want politicians to act. They want politicians to stand up for beliefs, whatever side that may be on. But I think there's less interest in, and we saw this last week with that big SNP ceasefire vote. The story became about political arguments more than it did actually what was going on in the conflict. And I think there is a clear distinction there in public opinion about those two things. And that's important to remember.